Good morning, everybody. As we go to Chitas of today, we're holding in the portion of Vayikra. We're holding on chapter 3, verse number 1. We're in the middle of the Karbonis that were brought in the Beis Hamidrash. We finished yesterday the Menchois, the meal offerings, and now we go to the Korban. We started off in the Torah with the Korban Olah, which was called an Olah, was a burnt offering, and now we go to the Korban Shlomim, which was a peace offering. And that was a Korban Shlomim was allowed to be brought by any Jew, any time, and that he wanted to bring a peace offering to God. If he sacrificed a peace offering. In a bakar, feast offering, if it brings from the cattle, he brings his korban, whether it's a male, in the keva, whether it's a female, it needs to be unblemished. Now Hashem before God. Now she says, why is it called a shlomim, peace? Because they bring peace into the world, and that's why it's called a shlomim, because it brought peace. Korban to God brings peace in the world. Another explanation is shlomim. Through them, there is peace, a harmony between the altar, the Mishkan, the altar, the Mizbeach had part of the korban, and the Kehanim had part of the korban, and the Bailim and the owners had part of the korban. That's why it brought peace. Everybody got a part of this korban. Somebody and he puts his hand, he leans his hand on top of the korban. And he sacrifices, he slaughters it. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, the sons of Aaron sprinkle the blood around the altar, around the mizbeach, around the altar. So here you're going to get the inside of an animal, what the anatomy of an animal, because you're going to learn the different parts, what had to be brought in the mizbeach, was given to the kohen, and what the rest of the Jew ate from this korban. And then he must bring in a fire offering for God from this offering. As achelev, he brings the fat, that covers the innards. It's called achelev asher al kerev, all the fats that is on the innards. Now she says, kol includes the fat that covers the keva. The Ban Museum. This is the opinion of Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva said it includes dust of fats of the inner intestines. So I believe last year I showed you a picture of the fats, because this is called chelev. There's a lot of fat in the animal, but this is a specific fat that covers, as the Torah is going to continue, the fats that covers the inner part of the animal, and the two kidneys, and the fat that's on the kidneys, that is also on the flanks, and he has to also remove the diaphragm along with the kidneys. He should take it out. Now she says, flanks in Old French, Taylor says itself in this manner, since the fat upon the kidneys, which when the animal is alive, is the upper end of the flanks. The kidneys are under it. This refers to the fat under the loins, which is called loin bells in Old French. It is white fat that is visible on the upper part of the flanks, but on the lower part of the flanks, the flesh of the flanks cover it. So there's the inner fat and there's the outer fat. Hayeseris, this is a protective wall, the diaphragm called ebers in Old French. In Aramaic, it's called chatzah de kavda, the lobe of the liver. So there's a diaphragm, there's a cover that covers over the liver. Allah covered. Now she says, on the liver means he should take a small part of the liver with it. Elsewhere it says, we say, seres mina covered, and the diaphragm with a part of the liver. So he took part of the liver with this diaphragm that covered the liver. Allah covered Allah clois. Besides the liver and besides the kidney, he must remove this. The diaphragm must go with it. Aaron takes all these parts and he brings them on the altar. Brings it, sends it to the top of the wood fire, which was on the fire of the Mizbeach. It's a pleasing offering to God. Not just ala oil, it's not oil, it's a shlomim. That should be beside the ascending offering. We thus learn that the daily morning ascent offering must precede all other sacrifices. The oil is tamid, which was brought in the morning. Beis Hamikdash opened up with an oil, with a burnt offering, a tamid, closed also in the evening with a tamid. So everything that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash was brought after the oilas tamid, the first offering of the morning, and everything needs to be brought before the afternoon oil. Verse number 6. If he brings the sacrifice, he brings it from a goat. For a peace offering, Hashem, Zach in the cave, the whether it's a male or a female, he must be unblemished. If he brings a sheep, Hashem, he should bring it before God. Now she says, why does it tell her to separate a goat from a fish, from a sheep? Usually the Torah puts these two together. And so since it's designated part of a sheep has an additional component that is not amongst the designated parts of a goat, because sheep have a special part to it, and that is its tail. Sheep has a tail, also offered, is therefore divided into two separate passages. It separates the sheep because it had a very fatty tail. And he puts his hand upon the head of this carbon. And he brings it before the tent of meeting, brings it to the base of Mishkan. And then the kohen needs to dash the blood of this altar, of this carbon around the altar. Now you should know, is as you can soon see that the words of Rashi, the way the kohen did it was actually saviv around the whole mizbeach. What he did, he used to two zirikas that were four. He went to each corner. He sprinkled one corner and went on both sides. And he went to the other corner, sprinkled the corner, and went on both sides. So that's the Rashi. Shtei matane shenaba. This is two applications that are divided into four sides. How he dashed the blood by the means of the vessel. And only in the case of a sin offering does he place the blood on the altar with his fingers. So in general, he would throw the blood. At certain times, the chatas, he actually took the blood with his finger and put it on the altar. Verse number 9. He must bring a fire offering to God for peace offering. He must remove its choicest parts, his entire tail. That's by a sheep. The tail was a very fatty part of the animal. The serena was and also the fat that covered the innards. And all the fat that's in the innards. As she says, this, what its fat means, its choice parts. What is? Again, by a sheep, the choice part of the fat is the tail. Lomas eitza, above the kidneys that give counsel. You call the eitza. It's called the kidneys are called eitzes. They're called the counsels because they give counsel to the body, so to say. Verse number 10, verse actually and those are the two kidneys, and the fat that's on the kidneys. Which is on the flanks of the animal. Again, he must take the diaphragm that is part of the diaphragm that's along with the kidneys, which is over there, and also diaphragm, which is on the liver. Verse number 11, vehikted. HaKohen HaMizbecha Lechem Ishel Hashem, and the priest must bring it all on the altar. This is for a fire to God. Now she says, Lechem Ishel Hashem. Now she says, the food for the fire, for the sake of God. Lechem, Lashem Michael. Why? It's denotes a concept of food. We're calling this food. Similarly, we find, let us put the harmful plants of his food, belachmei. Says also about Shetzer, when he made a party, he made a great feast, lechem, he called lechem. Because lechem is the main part of the meal, and it's called the feast of the meal, lechem. Verse number 12, he makes karbani, if he brings a sacrifice to the gold vehicle of Hashem, he brings it before God, he puts his hands on the head of the animal before the tent of meeting. And Aaron will sprinkle his blood on the altar. He can bring a fire offering to God. As a chela machas akerev, again, the fats that cover the innards. As a kol achela v'shal akerev, all the fats that are on the innards. And also the two kidneys, and the fat that's upon them. He puts it on, he takes it with the liver. Verse number 16. And the kohen brings it upon the altar. Lechem, this is a bread. The bread to God, it's a food to God, so to say. It's a pleasing smell to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, called chalev. As you learn from over here, the most important thing that all chalev, all fats, belongs to God. So today, you're not allowed to eat certain fats of an animal. 17, verse 17. Chuk HaSolam, the Dereisechem, this is an everlasting law. You're not allowed to eat any fat till today. Chuk HaSolam, it's an ever law. They are not allowed to eat fat in Chodam. Chuk HaSolam. This is Rashi says the entire verse is well expounded in Teres Kaina. And this ends the Chumash for today. Okay, we're now going to go to the Tanya of the day. We're holding in chapter 38 of Tanya, and the Alter Rebbe is explaining that what is the concept of this whole symptom, this whole contraction that the Eibishter made to say the Shtalshlus, the way that the godly light, the infinite light of God, descends into this world. And ultimately becomes part of the physical world. The difference in the concept of, by God, everything is physical and everything is a concept of a contraction. Everything is hidden from him. The difference is the way it's ultimately revealed in every part of this world. So the Alter Rebbe explains, in the guf agashmi mamish, in the physical body of a living creature and its absolute animate being, such as stones and earth, in which no life or spiritual are apparent, since they lack even the power of growth, like a stone. Or the ray of the divine creative power is in a state of unparalleled contraction. So in the rock, you cannot see anything. You can't see growth. You can't see it's an inanimate object. There's no concept. If you don't even see it grow, like even vegetation, a flower, food. You don't see it grow. And so minute is a life force. Is the godly life force that's in this rock, which within these inanimate beings. They lack even the power of growth. Simply pashut, an inanimate object seemingly doesn't move on its own, doesn't grow on its own, etc. Then you go to Me'ach, then you go to vegetation. Oh, the ain't with Simpson Godru Kolkach. Over there, its contraction is not so big. The phenomenon of growth, when you see something growing, you see, wow, it's living. Growth indicates the presence of something more than mere physical matter, because it's growing. Something is making it grow. Some degree of spirituality is in evidence. And in general, it's divided. The world is divided into 4 categories: doimen, an inanimate object; me'ach, vegetation; chai, animals. There you see even more growth; and medaber, ultimately human beings. Human beings are called medaber, that they can speak. So they're given the name medaber, capability of communication. Verbal communication, like God spoke and the world was created. In Kabbalah, it says that they correspond to the 4 letters of God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Shem Havaya Baruch Hu. Shem Emenu Nishpoyim Mishpoyim, that each and every one derive from these 4 categories. Each one derive its life force from one of the letters of the God's name. Just like the illumination of the flow of vitality found in minerals and in vegetables categories bears no comparison or likeness to the illumination that flows from the vitality of clothed an animal and a man. So you can really subdivide it into 2 different categories. In the category of vegetation and inanimate objects, and the category of man and animals. So there's no, you can see it, you can't say even in these 4 categories, you can't compare a stone to a vegetation. There's something that both inanimate, you see a life force, you don't breathe, so to say. And then you go to the next 2 categories, animals and humans. Some people want to say the humans act like animals. Although the 4 categories, whether it's in a human being or a rock, divine animating light is the same in the term of concealment of the contents of God. Ultimately, it doesn't make a difference to an animal or a rock. Both of them came about through a tzimtzum, through a contraction. And ultimately, all 4 categories, the inner aspect of the divine light is concealed equally. And all 4 categories, the light is clothed in the same garment, they all come out of the same garment, which is called in Kabbalah, they all come out of this garment that shines. Namely the garment, the veil of Noiga. Hence, in none of these categories, it's apparent that their vitality is actual godliness. It doesn't make a difference in a human being, the highest level, or the lowest level, the rock. Both of them, both these entities don't per se feel their existence. Despite their quality, the vitality, that's the difference. They're equal in that all come from a veil. They all come from a concept where something is hidden. The essence is not revealed. But the vitality, can't compare. Hopefully a human being realizes he's more important in the aspect of his vitality of godliness than an animal, even though he might love an animal. And his vitality, his importance, and in what his needs, his responsibility is greater. That's why he has a responsibility. If he has an animal, he has a responsibility over that animal. And he has responsibility over the vegetation, and he has responsibility over rocks. But he understands that he has a greater responsibility in life because he has a greater vitalizing soul. He has a greater revelation of godliness within him than a rock or an animal. So therefore, similarly, with no comparison like between the illumination and the life of blessed, meaning the inner aspects, without concealment, with the garments, with no garments. Now you go to the next step, and you go to the next step. There's no comparison between all these 4 levels and a mitzvah, because in the mitzvah there's nothing hidden. In the mitzvah, as we explained many times, in the mitzvah we have the godly soul. We have the godly wisdom, the godly will. There's nothing hidden in this mitzvah, which radiates and clothes over the mitzvah consisting of action. And so too, mitzvahs are connected to words. The bitus aside, even the moving of the lips, even without intention, which is compared to action. Words in Torah is compared to an action mamish, as we mentioned before. There's no comparison. Now, the illumination of the Ein Sof found in mitzvah bears no likeness in comparison with the superior illumination and flow of the blessed Ein Sof radiates and clothes the kavan of the mitzvah. And now we go to the next level. Not only is there no comparison between all these 4 levels and a mitzvah bli kavana, Now we go to the level of a mitzvah kavanah. When you have a mitzvah kavanah, the illumination of light that comes into this physical reality, even into myself, is much greater when I do it with kavanah. What's the kavanah? The simple kavanah. There's one simple kavanah. There's one simple intention. There's one simple meditation of everything. And that is, a Jew does a mitzvah for one simple reason, because he wants to cleave to God. To doing the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We hear it over and over by these karbanos. The Eibishter God says it simply. You bring this animal, you think to yourself, what do you do? Take an animal, you shacht it, you take the inner, the fats, you put it up. The Eibishter says, it's a nachas ruch. That's my rotzen. You might not understand it. You might thinking, what is it? But you should understand one thing. And that's one thing that everybody can understand. And that is, the Eibishter says, I have a nachas ruch. That's the way you create a nachas ruch with me. If you want to do my will, this is my will. And by this will, when somebody does, even in a human being, when somebody does somebody else's wishes, he creates a unity. We create a bond within one another. I asked you for something, you do it for me, I feel not closer to you. Imagine if I asked you to do something, you say no. Okay. So then we don't have a good relationship, that I ask you something and you cannot accomplish it. When I ask you for something and you do it for me, and you do it with simcha, with joy, because you do it because you want to make me happy. So now we have an inner bond. We have a connection. And that creates unity between people. That's why the Kabbalah Shlamim was called a offering of peace. Why? Because it brought everything together. Everybody was happy. Not only an oila, when the person brought an oila, burnt offering, was only brought in the mizbeach. So the Jew had nothing, the Kohen had nothing. It was brought totally to God. Okay, I can understand. That's a very high level that the person gives himself over totally. But a shlamim, a peace offering, everybody walks out happy. And the Kohen's happy, and the Jew is happy, and the Mizbeach's happy, so to say. And that's what Shlomo, it brings peace. And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. Why the Jew brought a Shlomo? Because he wanted to bring peace. He wanted to bring unity. He wanted to bring the concept of a relationship between everything in the world. That's why we do these things. Because we want to be close to God. We want to connect to God. And the Eibush says, do me this and you'll be close to me. I'll give it to Shuhud that the Eibishter, he and his will is one. So therefore, there's no greater concept of creating this unity between a Jew, between a human being, and God is through the mitzvah. So too, not only doing the mitzvah, but when we daven, when we pray, and we have kavanah, as it says in every synagogue, know who you're praying for, as the Alter Rebbe writes. There's a simple kavanah. There's one simple kavanah tefillah. Even tefillah has many deep concepts in Kabbalah and Chassidus, the meaning and the meditation. But there's one simple meditation. I'm praying to God. That's every Jew can have that simple meditation. I'm praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm praying to the Eibishter, who's waiting for us. God is waiting in the morning to me to come and down. And that's to come and pray. And that's it. That's what the Eibishter God wanted. As the Gemara says, when it says in the Torah, in the Pasuk, you serve God with all your heart. Levavcha is tefillah, is the concept of prayer. Whether we pray with a minion or pray ourselves, doesn't make a difference. The concept of prayer is the concept of the connection of Levavcha, of my heart that connects to God. And all the blessings of the Shema, the Shabbat and all blessings that we do. Shekavana behem, one simple kavana. Shemedavik mashafte v'sichle boyiz baruch. I want to, he attaches his thought and his intellect to God. That's what my kavana is. My kavana is, the Eibishter wanted me to do this, and I want to fulfill his will. And why did God want me to do this? Alter Rebbe explains the whole concept of carbon. I mean, though we're very uncomfortable with carbonis in a way, many of us. The whole concept of carbon comes to the word karev, to come close. Carbon comes to the word karev, to come close to God. You might think, how does that come close? How you come close to God? Because doing the wishes of God. She says, when it says, that the Abish says, I have a great pleasure that I asked you to do something and you did. Simple concept. Simple concept. Any person, like a human being, when somebody asks you to do something and you do it, creates a unity, I get a nachas ruach. If I ask somebody to do something and they do it, and especially they do it because they want to be nice to me, they want to fill my desires in life. There's nothing greater than that. There's no greater concept than creating a nachas ruach, a pleasure, and a relationship between one another than through a mitzvah, through davening, through any mitzvah that we do for HaKadosh Baruch. And that ends the Tanya for today. Today is the 4th day of the month. The Tillim of today is the 23rd to the 28th chapter of Tillim. The 23rd to the 28th chapter of Tillim. If you do those chapters, you would do the chitas of the day. We'll say the Hayom of the day. Today's Hayom. The Rebbe writes, Avodah of a layman has 2 categories. Number 1, Avodah means service with himself. When actually at work, in a free moment, in the store, for example, he should study a Mishnah or 2, or chapter of Tanya. He should commit some Torah to memory. For example, Chumash, Mishnah, Tehillim, Tanya. So he'll be able to review these while in the marketplace, the street, or wherever. That's important avodah for a yid, that he takes time of his busy schedule and he chaps arayin, he grabs a minute here and a minute there. And if he knows it by heart, it's even better. If he knows a Mishnah by heart, or Tehillim by heart, he says it by heart as he's walking in the street. And number 2, the avodah with another. When discussing business, when you meet somebody else, he should turn the conversation towards introducing a story with content and seek some reason or opportunity to stimulate the other to study Torah or to do similar activities. And that's the avodah with others. You should realize that when 2 Jews get together, it's not for the sake of business only or the sake of just friendship. It's for the sake of elevating each other, giving each other more than just their friendship, to giving each other, bringing each other. What does Hillel say? Hillel said that you should bring one Oivus Abrius, Mekarvan LaTorah. The love of one another, one person, another person should bring about the concept Mekarvan LaTorah, that both of us come closer to the Torah itself. That's the Yom of the day. I wish you all a wonderful, beautiful day. And with Shem, tomorrow we'll continue to learn. 8 a.m. we'll continue to learn the Chitas of the day. Have a wonderful